Did you expect this to happen?
No, and I don't think the newspapers expected it either, Tom. And I think one of the problems the government will now face is you have newspapers like The Telegraph and The Mail telling their readers in this morning's editions that Liz Truss was sticking to the 45p tax plan. They won't like to have been humiliated in front of their readers. I think this was a decision taken very late last night. I think the Chief Whip has been talking to Conservative MPs at this conference and suddenly really aware of the scale of the opposition within the Conservative Parliamentary Party to the 45p issue. So despite, on the BBC yesterday, Liz Truss saying she was going to stick to this policy, they U-turned very late last night.
It's interesting, we were all sent a press release from the Treasury yesterday, embargoed until 10:30 last night, saying that the Chancellor today in his big speech is going to say that we're sticking with the plan. 2 hours later, that all fell apart. Is this simply a maths issue? Is this simply a party that to some extent has become ungovernable?
Well, that's the real fear for the Conservative Party now, and the only way I think Liz Truss can address this is change the way that she's been governing the Conservative Party.
For the last 2 weeks?
I think they began to think the rules didn't apply to them. So, for example, Liz Truss wasn't giving broadcast interviews, really, during the leadership campaign, the Tory leadership campaign. And then when she won the leadership, she didn't really appoint any Sunak supporters to her top team. You know, when you're a winner, you appoint, largely your own people to the top team, but you include some people from the rival camp to build the broad church. She almost included nobody in her top team from the Sunak side. And then I think they had the mini budget. Again, they didn't think the rules applied to them anymore. They thought they could do almost anything they wanted without the Office of Budget Responsibility, without anyone, really a cabinet being pre-briefed. And I think they've realised the laws of political gravity still apply. And whether they now go and listen to their backbenchers, listen to conventional economic organisations so that they build their policies on rock rather than sand, she has a chance if she changes the way she behaves. If she carries on behaving as she did, then it's sort of, how long will it be until Boris is back? 3 months or 6 months?
Is the modern Conservative Party to the left of Tony Blair?
That's a fascinating question, and I think, how long have we got to answer it? But I think your questions that you just asked Chris Philp on tax were absolutely on the money. Where is the Conservative Party on economic competitiveness? Not just, reversing 2 years of tax cuts, but potentially reversing 10 years of tax cuts. But on issues like Brexit, on those big national identity issues, I think the Conservative Party is still to the right of Tony Blair, but sometimes I worry too.
It is so peculiar to see that this became such a touchstone issue, given that we know that the IFS has said that the 45p to 40p reduction could indeed be revenue neutral. Yeah. It seems that this isn't a fiscal issue. This is an issue of emotion, not of hard cash, but of how people feel. Is that a sensible way to govern?
Look, I don't know what you were getting from activists yesterday, Tom, but when I was talking to them, they don't mind selling a top rate of income tax, potentially in normal times. But knocking on someone's door and explaining to someone during the middle of an energy price crisis that they're having to find more money to pay for basic bills, but the Tories could cut taxes for the top earners in the country. That was what Tory members were worried about. I think in normal times you could sell it.
It could be revenue neutral. It's just that it's too complicated to explain. Is that the issue?
I think that is the key issue. But for some people, it's also a question of solidarity. A sense is, are the rich paying their fair share? And yes, you say you may get more money from a tax cut, but would you really? And I think there is some doubt that when you cut the top rate of tax from 80 to 60%, it did produce more money. When it went down from 60 to 40, you got more money. But 45p to 40, I think people are less sure about the economics of that.
So let's look beyond this particular mini-budget, because we're expecting over the next few weeks to get what was once called Operation Rolling Thunder. I think they've ditched that name now, of a series of supply-side reforms. Reform to childcare, reform to migration, reform to planning. Yep. All of these different areas, some of them incredibly contentious. What does the last 24 hours say about the likelihood of being able to roll out that ambitious tranche of supply-side reform?
Well, look, First of all, it should say, and I think you and I probably agree on this, Tom, it's necessary. You know, the world is looking at Britain and not thinking that we are the dynamic economy that we were after the Thatcher years. So something has to be done to ensure that inward investors want to come back to Britain to create the jobs that we all need. But if we're going to do contentious stuff of the kind that you've just outlined, Liz Truss needs to sit round with people like Michael Gove, people who form the government's majority, and check that there is enough understanding between them that actually this will pass the House of Commons. There's no point Liz Truss standing up, being bold, promising to change the world, but not having the votes in her back pocket. So she needs to be more consensual. And if she learns that from this episode, perhaps some good will come of it.
Looking at the numbers, it only takes around 35 Conservative MPs to overturn the government's majority, sizable though it is. Just finally in this conversation, is Liz Truss able to make those alliances, or are there simply some people in the parliamentary party, perhaps too many people in the parliamentary party, who simply see a target on her back?
I think the opinion poll that we had last week, when YouGov found that the Conservatives were 33% behind, has frightened Conservative MPs to death. I think they are very worried about whether Liz Truss can take them to election victory. If you are seen as a winner, you can command the confidence of backbench MPs. They'll give you the benefit of the doubt. But if they don't think you're a winner, they'll be more rebellious. And so in a way, the first thing that she needs to do, particularly with the party conference speech in 2 days' time, is show that she still has an ability to connect with the British people. If she doesn't have that connection, I think we will be talking very soon about a change in leader.